Pardon the delay. I was trying to figure out why my stupid notes wouldn't come up the way I had planned, but of course, nothing ever works. There is no technology that we can count on. There's very little we can count on in this world, except consistent sunrises and Bitcoin running. Let's take a sip, talk about what's new. Let's take a sip. This tastes like $30,000 Bitcoin. Delicious, delicious. We love that kind of stuff. Good morning, everyone. And indeed, we've got some acknowledgement of the 30K Bitcoin from Thomas. Indeed. All right. So let's jump in to our fakest news we can find. We have a lot this morning to cover, right? There's a lot of fake news to cover. So first, let me just tell you that Bloomberg says that a pharmaceutical company, right? Pharmaceutical companies are looking to get buzzy weight loss shots approved for younger and younger patients. Okay, so Ozempic for kids? Why not? Why not, guys? Ozempic for kids, no trouble. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? We've got a lot of homeless trouble in America these days, right? So, but there's a way we got to talk about it, apparently, right? This is from CBS News, right? They're saying that a Colorado man with special needs speaks out after being attacked by a person experiencing homelessness, right? So they're not homeless. They're just experiencing the homelessness, guys, okay? It's not exactly the same thing, but watch yourself. You don't want to label someone homelessness when it's really just an experience. They're just going through it, right? That's okay. Don't do it that way. All right. So, we're very busy in Ukraine. You're not hearing about Ukraine as much these days because there's more trouble in the Middle East. But let's not forget, right? So we get this from, I think it's the New Yorker. I didn't get the actual title of the actual publication, but I think it's New Yorker. Letter from Ukraine. Ukraine's most powerful spiritual force faces a choice. The war has made the Orthodox Church a force for national unity, but where will it go from here, right? Well, we found out this weekend that the parliament in Ukraine actually banned the Orthodox Christian Church, right? Because it was needed to preserve democracy. So Slava Ukraini, everyone. Slava Ukraini. No more Ukrainian church. No more Orthodox Church. Who needs it? It's such a stupid thing during war. Why would you want that? Speaking of war, right? The BBC has come up with a really important document here. It's called How to Spot Disinformation. Okay. So on social media. So the BBC, just ignore that they fall for every hoax. Okay. That's not what we're looking at here, right? It doesn't matter that they followed the Trump, Russia gate thing. No. The fine people hoax. I think they still say that Trump told Americans to drink bleach, right? So BBC, right? Not exactly the best, but they got advice for you, right? Now, it's all done with the Jake Tapper pleading face, right? So Jake Tapper's not in it, but I've noticed that other people actually do try to read the news like he does, right? So whenever Jake Tapper is telling you the news he really wants, he does it with this face, right? Where he's like, oh. So the BBC journalist, right? She's like this is how you have to spot misinformation. She gives you some advice, okay? So she does it like this, though. So I'm going to do it just like her. She goes, if you see that the post, that the shares, the things that people share and post online are really divisive, they're probably fake, okay? And then she says, you can actually look, right? Because they actually had a video of people putting makeup on Palestinians, and it was just for charity, right? It was just for charity. So don't worry about that. That was not fake news. She gave an example, right? And so the other things you can do is you can check the weather in the back of the picture, she said, right? Just look at the weather and make sure it comes from, so if the weather doesn't match up to what's going on there, it's fake. That's her big advice, right? If the weather in the back of the picture doesn't check out, fake. So she keeps bleeding, and then she goes, what you really have to do is make sure it comes from the trusted sources, right? So she does the face. It's really, really, really good journalism. When you do the face like this, and then you really get like kind of a little bit like Jake Tapper does, right? Like, oh, so I hope you see the real news now, right? So she did that. It was really good. It was BBC at its best, right? So John Oliver, right, on HBO, he should be on BBC. What's he doing in American news shows, right? So John Oliver All right, this was he did his opening monologue on this. He did it on homeschooling. Okay, he did it on homeschooling, and I'll just let you know what he was surprised about. Right, that he was surprised that there's even states, right, where you don't have to ask the government permission to homeschool your kids. So he didn't know that. He was blown away by that. Right. So he reports that there are states where kids can homeschool and they don't have to tell their state what they're doing in their homes, right? And the audience was like, "Oh my God, right? What a crazy family!" And now he started to go on about how like Nazis did a lot of homeschooling too, right? For real, for real. So John Oliver, right? He's just the best. So we got this too. These are all coming in at once, right? We've got we've got this one here from. Oops, 1 second. So the sorry, I just got a text message. So the U.S. Treasury is saying now that the crypto mixers are a money laundering concern, right? So they have this news and they say under pressure to address reports that Hamas and other terrorist groups are partially funded with crypto. Treasury's FinCEN proposed a rule to categorize mixers as a threat. And this all comes from an article that Elizabeth Warren wrote the other day. All right, so the reference here for FinCEN is actually FinCEN itself. It's Elizabeth Warren, right? So she wrote an article the other day that says cryptocurrency feeds Hamas's terrorism. Decentralized finance companies should be subject to the same anti-money laundering rules as banks. Elizabeth Warren wrote this. Reuters reported a few weeks ago that Hamas armed wing announces suspension of Bitcoin fundraising. It was too traceable. They didn't like it, right? They didn't like the coin. Hamas didn't like the coin. Now we've got these two are sort of special editions here, right? They're the election in Argentina, which happened yesterday. So the lead up to the election, you have the Guardian, right? Bad and dangerous. Argentina's Trump on track to become president. And then you do this face with him where he's like this, rah! You know, all these faces of Malay. See him, he's got his chainsaw for what he's going to do to the government. He just starts priming the chainsaw. So he gets this face with his chainsaw on. So they're like, well, look at this crazy person, right? So that was before. He went into this. But this is what they say after. So this is the Guardian after. Far-right populist Javier Milei fails to win first round of Argentina's presidential election. Potty-mouthed political outsider will head to November runoff with centrist finance minister Sergio Massa, right? So he came in second. There are some reports that it was a little sketchy over there in the first two tours, but we'll see. One of the things I thought was funny, though, so this is just a simulation coincidence. I don't know what's going on with it, but here's what actually happened, right? So it turns out that the guy who won is a Peronist from the Eva Peron days, and his name, he was the economics minister. He was the economics minister. I'm not making this up, guys. He was the actual guy in charge of whatever money shitcoin they use down in Argentina, and it's he's at the driver's seat when they've experienced all of this inflation. And he's running for president, I swear to God. So I think a few Bitcoiners have made some comments about it. I'll see if I can find one of them. Basically, everyone's laughing about how such a mentally handicapped person could get there. You even get the FX hedge thing. Argentina market analysts see silver lining in Peronist election win. A surprised first place for Argentina's ruling Peronists in a general election on Sunday could calm market fears about a runaway win for libertarian radical Javier Milei, who was pledged to dollarize the economy and shut the central bank. So the folks who are, sort of complaining about this, there's a few that say all kinds of shenanigans, all kinds of election fortification went on. Now that it's a runoff, we'll talk about that in the context of America in a second, but basically it lowers the threshold for cheating when there's just two candidates, which we'll talk about. But the thing about Milei, and I just this is what I find kind of funny about the simulation part of it. So first of all, he loses to a guy named Massa, right? Like isn't that Isn't that the like slave way of describing your master? Wasn't that the way Massa? Right? Wasn't it Massa? That's his name. It's Massa, right? So it's Massa. Now, Massa, right? Oh, Massa came out just ahead, right? He got about 5% more of the vote in the first round. Now, the third place candidate, I'm not kidding you, right? The person who now, like in the United States, right? We talk a lot about RFK can sort of decide who the president is because he can push his support to one candidate or the other, depending on what he decides to do, either stay in or get out. It basically opens up all the options to him to choose, right? So right now in America, what we've been talking about here for a while is that only one person really matters for the US presidential vote, and that's RFK. He literally gets to decide who the president is. His vote counts for way more than anyone else. So because he can do that, right, we're in a bit of a weird situation now. But there's a third party candidate in Argentina as well. Do you know what this third party candidate's name is? Bullrich. It's Bullrich. That's the actual name. Bullrich, right? So Bullrich can decide the future of the economy in Argentina. Bullrich can say whether it's the Massa or Milei. It's pretty funny, right? So there we are, right? We got the Malay and we've got the, Malay. So we'll see how it goes. But that's what's going on in Argentina. The next vote, I guess, is sometime in November. Of course, we'll be covering it here and we'll offer some predictions. It looks like there's cheating, though. So it's difficult to predict when you get this kind of cheating. But there we have it. So it is Massa versus Bullrich. I don't make this stuff up, guys. I just tell you what's happening. So Massa, we'll see how it goes. Now, something people are talking about today is an article by Konstantin Kisin. He wrote it in the Free Press, which is Barry Weiss's outfit. So Barry Weiss, almost a speaker at Bitcoin 2023. We might revisit having her at Bitcoin 2024. So I was talking with her office last year. We came a little bit close, but this, she lives in LA. You got to get her to Miami, and there was some stuff. And we said maybe next year, so maybe this year. So the article is called "The Day the Delusions Died." Right, it's where I got my title today. The day Delusions Die. So they're saying it happened on the day that the original Hamas attack happened. From Gaza to the West Bank, and ours from Gaza to Israel. And I'll just tell you a bit about what they say in it. So the big observation, I guess the big takeaway that everyone is cluing into is that many people sort of went to bed as liberals and woke up as conservatives based on what had happened, right? So that was the logic. So this is what he says. The events of the last 2 weeks have shattered the illusion that wokeness is about protecting victims and standing up for persecuted minorities. This ideology is and always has been about the one thing many of us have told you it is about for years: power. And after the last 2 weeks, there can be no doubt about how these people will use any power they seize. They will seek to destroy, in any way they can, those who disagree. What we have witnessed over the last 2 weeks with enormous pro-Hamas rallies in cities like London, Paris, and DC was the potential to change the immigration debate in a decisive way. It is much harder to pretend that allowing people to enter your country illegally is a moral good when you watch some of them celebrate mass murder in the streets of your capital cities. So the logic here that a lot of people were cluing into is that, you went to bed as a liberal. Let me just find the actual Barry Weiss quotes about it, right? Well, anyway, you go to bed a liberal, wake up a conservative, and that everything changes after what we saw in that. And you're seeing a little bit of it, right? You're seeing a little bit of things change, but I think it's deeper than most people realize, and I'll explain. So, just look at the way, and we've been talking about it for a while, the George Floyd debate tried to sneak into the backside of this Hamas debate, right? And we saw the leader of Hamas even say, don't forget, don't lecture us. This is the same as George Floyd in America, right? So where does this connection even come from, right? Well, it comes from this whole victim ideology, something that Gad Saad has called the parasitic mind. It's why we even think of that part of the world now as just an open air psychological virus incubating ground where they basically have stoked so many narrative on top of narrative, brainwashing on top of brainwashing, that no one's moved to reality there. There's nothing even close to it, right? It's just engagement and enragement and anger and everything filtered through that lens, right? So, and it's not so different in America, right? When it comes to the debates around race and things like that. Now, Tucker Carlson did a show this weekend talking exactly about this. And it turns out something that many of us have suspected for a long time, right? That the situation in Minneapolis in 2020 with George Floyd was not murder, right? Tucker Carlson using a new report that had just come out from the coroner, and the messages between the coroner and the police at the time show that they found enough fentanyl in his body that it looked pretty clear that he didn't die of any asphyxiation, any strangulation. There was no damage on his neck. Now, a lot of people, when they watched the video, sort of thought the same thing when they saw the police officer do it. Because he was doing it in open with people running cameras, it didn't look like he was premeditatively murdering someone, right? Now, George Floyd does lie during the physical altercation where he says he's not on drugs, because they ask him if he's on drugs, and he said, I'm not on drugs. That probably was the end of him. Now, Chauvin could have definitely known better. He could have definitely said, this guy's lying, he is on drugs. But it would have changed the way they handled the situation, and we probably would have had a different result as afterwards. So Tucker Carlson had a fella on the show talking about this, and he came out with some pretty amazing lines, right? Saying, well, here are the actual quotes, right? So this is from the county prosecutor. I called Dr. Baker early that morning to tell him about the case and to ask him if he would perform the autopsy on Mr. Floyd. He called me later in the day and told me that there were no medical findings that showed any injury to the vital structure of Mr. Floyd's neck. There were no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation. He said to me, Amy, what happens when the actual evidence doesn't match up with the public narrative that everyone's already decided on? He said, this is the kind of case that ends careers, right? So right away, you can just understand that if you follow the money a little bit here and you realize that people's jobs were on the line to tell a lie, you can understand a lot about how the world works, right? You can actually understand how we found ourselves in the predicament we're in right now, dealing with crime families running our country, and Elizabeth Warren out there saying that, like, even though we know it's not true, that they want to close down mixers and shit like that because Hamas, right? So the idea here that the day Delusions died, right? You could say it's this race thing in the Middle East and in America, but we're still not quite there. We're still not quite at the point where all the delusions have come apart, but they're getting closer. They are getting closer. There's the George Floyd racist stuff in America that looks like it at least has the beginnings of a new narrative that could arise from there. But even just universities in general, right? I'm not at the farm today. I made a decision yesterday not to go. Not because of this, but in the end, I probably couldn't have left. There were, thousands of people marching outside of my house, going on and on with the megaphone and blah, 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 right? From the river to the sea and all this stuff, and yelling and screaming and cursing. And when you go and look at the actual crowd, what do you find, right? It's mostly all, not just university students. You can imagine that they're the professors, right? The fancy professors. Now, one of the cool things, and one of the great things that have happened in the past couple of days with all the trouble, is this flipping of narratives, especially around colleges and universities. And one of the things you've seen are on all these campuses, you've seen like professors and students go around taking the posters of the hostages from Israel off so that people can't find them. You're seeing in New York City. I saw this one video of a Black woman just cussing out a liberal white couple that were taking pictures away. And I mean, just destroying them. And you should see their face. It's like they didn't even realize they did anything wrong, but they're powerless to fight against the Black woman because of the hierarchy of what's going on, right? So here's what Abigail Shriver says about all of these people on the campuses, because there's one other video of a man who doesn't look like a student. He's probably one of these grad students or something like that. He doesn't look that young. And he's there and he's taking off these pictures of people that have been kidnapped. And, what about the Palestinian children, he says. But here's what Abigail Schreier says. She says, besides the atrocities themselves, one image that should stay with Americans is the leftists ripping down posters of kidnapped children. That vandalism helps no one. It simply lays bare the smoldering cruelty they've long masked with academic verbiage. And isn't that the truth, right? Hasn't the universities been hiding for long enough in plain sight? Haven't they been some of the cruelest people out there with their arguments and their logic and their reasoning? Haven't they really been some of the worst perpetrators of this, right? These are the kinds of people that have been, for example, supporting folks like the Sean King at the Black Lives Matter thing that really helped perpetuate this whole George Floyd thing. But it turns out that the Gaza thing is taking him out too, right? So Black Lives Matter, despite the criminality and money laundering in America, and that they're just absolute, scammers. It's getting worse, right? So it turns out Sean King tried to take credit for negotiating some of the hostages to come home. There was even a picture where his family took one of him like staring outside into yonder as if he was like contemplating the negotiations and things like that. So he comes out, Sean King, right? Comes out and wrote an Instagram post where he kind of was taking credit, right? Hamas just freed the teenager Natalie and her mother. I'm so grateful. And he sort of makes it sound like he had a role to play, right? But the family comes out and says, we got this bizarre post from Sean King, who turns out to have millions of followers and claims that our relative supports the anti-Israel message he uploads on his page. The statement began, first and foremost, we made it clear that he is lying. Our family does not and did not have anything to do with him, neither directly nor indirectly. Not to him and not to anything he claims to represent, right? So everyone coming up today and saying, like, how could this guy be such an overt scammer? Christopher Rufo comes out and says, I almost feel pity for the BLM era gurus. Ibrahim Kendi, Patrice Cullors, Robin DiAngelo, Sean King, the establishment desperately wanted to summon moral figureheads for our racial reckoning, and all they could find was a rogues gallery of intellectually vapid scam artists. Stick Sex and Hammer adds, I think we'll just drag Sean King for being a grifting lunatic as usual. So lots of people, Dom Lucre comes out and says the same thing, right? Charlie Kirk says, disgraced BLM activist Sean King says he helped free American hostages from Gaza and knows them personally, right? The hostages say they've never even heard of him. Hotep Jesus, a speaker at Bitcoin 2023, who we love. Sean King grifted so hard that he got banned from the Grifties because he gives out these awards called the Grifties, right? For the biggest grifters in the game, right? So Hotep doing great, right? We're not done, right? Another school in Canada, Lincoln Alexander Law School. It's really the lowest law school in Canada. Like it's, not that I care about these rankings or anything like that, but if I went to Lincoln Alexander School of Law, I wouldn't be bragging if I was in Canada, right? It's as low as it gets. So they come out and they've unequivocally signed a letter. All of them, they just signed it, right? That they're just totally down with all of it, and and it's just the best, right? So that should be the end of those guys. Also, Greta Thunberg, right? Probably not as happy these days as she was last week. So she did this thing that I don't believe was actually premeditated. She put an octopus over her shoulder in one of her pictures, the one where we were talking about the other day where she was like free Gaza, but the octopus was there. And apparently this octopus is a major anti-Semitic symbol. I didn't know that. I have seen the pictures of the octopus and the tentacles. We know it in Bitcoin because we think of that as the central banks and the money game, right? But in this case, apparently it's also anti-Semitic. So now she's been banned from the Israeli, the education minister has banned her from any education materials in Israel. The stance disqualifies her from being an educational and moral role model, and she is no longer eligible to serve as an inspiration and educator for Israeli students. A win. We're winning, right? I think that's a win. So you get universities sort of falling apart at the seams. You get the media becoming less and less credible. And I think what Constantine was saying is more or less true, right? That there is this sort of day where the delusions died, but we're not quite there. We're not quite there. We're getting close, but we're not quite there. But the beginning of it is now clear and obvious what we're going to be fighting about in 2024. And every fight in America from now until America dies, I think, will have this reference. You can even see it with the Republicans yesterday and McConnell saying the following, right? So McConnell comes around and he says, a significant portion of Ukraine aid from Congress is being spent in states to make weapons. We're rebuilding our industrial base. The Ukrainians are destroying the army of one of our biggest rivals. I have a hard time finding anything wrong with that. That's Republican Mitch McConnell, who at this point, I don't know if he's too old, but we got to drop that motherfucker from space. All right. When I hear people say these things, when I heard Biden, I used to think Biden, yeah, just let him go, right? He's so old. Did you see he took another vacation this weekend and he was doing, you remember what Trump said a little while ago? Man, Trump is the best, right? When Trump was first giving that visual, the last time Biden took a vacation at the beach, he's like, he made this image where Biden couldn't lift his feet high enough to get over the sand and that he was doing the dementia shuffle in the sand, right? But just this idea, the way Trump pictured it, it's the perfect way that he struggled to raise his feet high enough to get over sand. And if you saw Biden this weekend walking along the beach with his wife, ex-babysitter, before his other wife died, right? He married the babysitter. So if you watch him walking along the beach, it's exactly that. He can't lift his feet enough. He actually has the dementia shuffle. It's like, right? So he does the dementia shuffle. I can't show it on the camera very well. I don't have enough room to do it here, but he does the dementia shuffle, right? So Trump, exactly right about that. But what McConnell is saying here, I think, is exactly the same as what Joe Biden said in his big presidential address last week. And it is the most disgusting thing you could imagine. To say that, oh, don't worry about all this war. We're making a bit of money off of it, right? Can you actually think of something better for Bitcoin than listening to these politicians just say, I don't give a shit what's burning. We're making money, bro. Woo! Right? That's what's going on here. So I think the delusions still have a way to go, but we're on the right track. We're starting to actually get some form of clarity and some form of focus onto what the actual issues are. And we can't ask for better than that, right? You get Liz Cheney saying the same thing, right? We get all this speaker stuff now, McCarthy, and what's going to be the next speaker, Tom Emer or Jim Jordan or any of these things, right? She says that amid 2 regional wars and out of control border crisis, Liz Cheney still calls Trump, right, the single most dangerous threat we face. So Mitch McConnell, Dick Cheney and his fucking daughter, right? These people, we're starting to see exactly what they're made of. There is no more hiding it. The masks are off, right? These people are actual warmongers. Now, we used to say it as like, oh, they're warmongers, but maybe they have some redeeming qualities. There's no redeeming qualities. The delusion that there is any redeeming quality besides what everyone has mentioned here, power and control, is lying, right? The delusion is these are just villains. It's that simple, right? There is no need to get nuance. There's no need for any of this stuff. And the reality, the hard reality of what America really is starting to come into intense focus. And the best way to describe it is something that I didn't even know about, right? Do you know this? So, and this is sort of to tie it into what's going on with the U.S. elections and Argentina again, right? And by the way, Argentina, go back to the thing we were talking about just a few seconds ago with the simulation. Argentina in not English, right? Argent, right, means silver or money. So the country itself means money in Latin languages. Argentina means place of money, kind of, or silver, right? Silver or money. But when I say, you can say monnaie in French, but it's argent, right? Your money is it's a derivative of silver, but it's a similar word, right? So the land of money has this situation where Massa, right, the master, is cheating in an election, and only Bullrich can decide. So is Argentina really just a mini version of planet Earth right now? Yes, it actually is. And America will be falling in line with exactly the same narratives that we'll be looking at in Argentina, which we're going to talk about in a second. So I saw it was a documentary by Oliver Stone, right, called Through the Looking Glass. So he's added Alice in Wonderland as a sequel to his JFK assassination film, which he came up with a few years ago. Now, Scott Adams was talking about it yesterday. A few other people have talked about it. I didn't know this, right? Everything. How many times have we talked about the JFK assassination here? Like a lot, right? I've been saying it since the moment I saw Tucker Carlson's interview about Nixon and the JFK assassination back in November 2022, which is where I predicted RFK was going to be a presidential candidate and that he would play a role in the next election, right? So this is before he announced it became a Bitcoiner, where I told you in the breakup, this is coming, right? RFK is coming. I didn't know he was going to become this big of a Bitcoiner, but that's the day I reached out to him, right? The day I reached out to him was when he announced to speak at Bitcoin 2023, where he announced he was a Bitcoiner and was doing all this stuff with Bitcoin and is now talking about backing the US dollar with Bitcoin and all this stuff. I said, because the narrative of the 2024 election actually goes back to 1964, when all of the shenanigans first started, when democracy fortification really got going, right? So now we know the truth. Did you know this? This is amazing. Do you know who is in charge of the Warren Commission? Do you guys know? It was Alan Dulles, the suspect in the assassination. Did you know that? Officially, the other suspect, the guy who was running the CIA, right? Do you know what Alan Dulles was also in charge of? Listen to this. So he was the head of the CIA until Kennedy fired him. So he's a disgruntled employee already, right? He was also in charge of the 1953 Iranian coup, right? He was in charge of the 1954 Guatemalan coup, right? He was in charge of the MK Ultra project, and he was fired over Bay of Pigs. He was fired over Bay of Pigs. So what did he get? The head of the Warren Commission. His brother is who they named the airport after in Washington, D.C. Dulles International Airport is named after his brother, right? So this fucking guy killed Kennedy. I don't need to know anything more. There's no other piece of information we need. I'm good. I get it, right? The suspect. If you were to go back in time and look at who the suspects were, it was Alan Dulles, the guy who fired him and was in charge of all of these dark arts files. So Alan Dulles, the very suspect, is also in charge of the investigation. He's in charge of the Warren Commission, as well as Gerald Ford, who becomes vice president, who sticks the knife into Nixon's back. So basically, right, I don't think you need any more fill in the blanks here. The CIA was not under Kennedy's control. He complained about it and they killed him. All right, that's what happened, right? Now, let's fast forward to Trump, right? Let's fast forward to Trump. Trump, I think, with the situation that we see with RFK in the race, the first polls have come out. In a race where RFK is involved, Trump is beating Biden by 7 points. Remove RFK, Trump is winning by 4 points against Biden, right? So I don't think we have to debate anymore about who RFK is taking votes from, especially with the reparations piece, especially with some of the other stuff he's doing on, sort of lefty stuff, right? You can always count on him to do a little bit of the lefty stuff, right? He's a noblesse oblige royal, kind of like a monarch. So his feelings aren't exactly the same as a political right-left. So that's a good thing, I think, right? I don't have to agree with everything RFK says and believes in, right? That's not really what we're going for here with RFK. We like RFK because he asks questions and pushes the envelope and forces people into these inability to hold the delusions that Konstantin Kisin was talking about. The delusion being that somehow this structure is out there to help us, that the US government is out there fighting for freedom and our freedoms, and none of that's true and hasn't been since they killed Kennedy. Everything they've done since, if anything we've gotten out of it, has just been like a little byproduct, like a little bonus, right? Inevitably, everything thereafter is more or less what Alan Dulles has been involved in here. It is the ability to control and create this unipolar American world. So there's another propaganda film coming out. It turns out that Al Pacino, and they're going to blame it all on the mob, right? They're going to make a new movie now trying to tell you that the mob killed Kennedy. No, they might have been involved, right? They might have been involved. They were mad that Kennedy stole the 1960 election out of Chicago. So it's the Chicago mob getting him. Now, all of that might be true, but here's the beautiful parts, right? Here's what is amazing. Here's where Bitcoiners are going to become vital in the 2024 election process. And it's related to what's going on in Argentina, right? So remember, Bitcoiners understand through our own world of scaling and our own fights about scaling and the engineering behind Bitcoin that the system itself is a trade-off, right? We don't forget the politics. It's an engineering trade-off between credibility and convenience. If you make Bitcoin easy, you get Ethereum and the credibility goes down, right? That makes it convenient. If you optimize for the credibility, well, then you get something more realistic, right? So whenever you look at these voting things, and Israel is a perfect case, right? Israel has no questions about its voting sanctity, and it's because it's day of voting, exactly as Vivek is calling for, a holiday. Everyone votes. It's all on one day. You have to have ID, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you make it mail-in, writing ballots and all that stuff, well, of course, it's a big scam, and it's very easy to cheat, and there's very little reason why you would put any credibility in these elections. Now, I admit, Joe Biden, everything went perfect in the 2020 election. It's just the most amazing election that we ever had. Every state was the best. Every state got it right. No one screwed up. Completely credible system, right? Right. So we're now having to deal with all of these questions, and it's becoming more and more clear what is actually going on. And Bitcoiners don't have to adjust to this. You see everyone else having to adjust the day the delusions died, and it's so confusing, and universities and the media is lying to us and the government's lying to us. Well, we know that, right? This is not an adjustment to us. This is merely adding more people to our side of the argument. More people are starting to realize what's going on, which can help us. So I continue to make the prediction that with Kennedy in the race, it looks like they got to fire up the old assassination machine again, because it ain't going to work. Right? I think with 3, 4, 5 candidates, the way we have, if you add Cornel West to it, Trump wins by even more, because each of these people is cutting out of the Democrat voter base. Even if you flip and change the candidate from Biden to Newsom, you don't really get better results, right? It looks like more and more Americans are saying, oh, this is a bit of a scam, right? And it doesn't even matter if more and more Americans are saying it's a scam. The primordial part of all of this, the way that it works, the way that it functions, it requires you to also have wealth, right? What's happening with the wealth? Well, the banks are laying people off. Frank Shapiro says Goldman Sachs sustained higher mortgage rates will have the most pronounced impact in 2024 in the housing turnover. Nearly all mortgage borrowers have interest rates below current market rates. Now, all the big banks have laid people off today, right? You got Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, they're cutting 5% of their workforce. Major banks are going to cut 20,000 jobs amid economic uncertainty, right? At the same time, you've got Elon Musk calling for total deregulation, right? Total deregulation. We're going to die a slow death, he says, if we don't deregulate, right? You've also got Joe Rogan, who's here talking about the potential for a thermonuclear war. Now, I think Joe Rogan is totally wrong here, right? I think we still have a bit of breathing room in the Middle East. I'll explain. So he's saying, oh, you know, you get now the Chinese are sending ships to the Middle East, and they're going on about Hamas and all this stuff. I think the Chinese, from what I understand, have already had these 6 fleet ships over there. America sent 2 aircraft carriers in now. But here's the thing. Who's really going to mess with anyone down there, right? Jordan doesn't have an army, right? Egypt can't, right? They're very bound by U.S. money. Unless they have another revolution internally, they're not going to participate. Syria, the Israelis just bombed their airports. They've been at war for over 10 years. They're cooked. They can't do anything. Lebanon, right? No, that's not a real army. Some people say that the Hamas or Hezbollah can kick the Israeli army's ass. I don't think that's true. The Saudis, can they really get involved? I don't think so. I think MBS is trying to build a different country here. And guess what? the Houthis and all these people from Yemen that have been attacking them for years are on the same side as Hamas. So they have an equal enemy to Israel here, right? So you can't just imagine that they're going to get pushed around and fall into this. So the fear that he has of the global thermonuclear chess game war thing, I think is not realistic, right? I think we're going to continue to watch what's going on there, but the drama of it will change the other major countries, and I think America actually swallows a bunch of the change here, and the change itself will be exactly what we've all come to understand, that we're not the good guys. We haven't been the good guys for a long time, and it's the money and our manipulation of the money and the power that have resulted in this situation, which is now we can't stomach it anymore, right? So Balaji had this whole thing that he wrote called the Losing the Mandate of Heaven. Now that's something the Chinese have often thought about, right? That each government gets sort of a mandate of heaven, and when they lose it, it's time for revolution. And it looks like we're coming to that point in America. And here's what the logic that he uses says, right? So he says, losing the mandate of heaven. Let's be real. U.S. political leaders since the Gulf War are perhaps the worst leaders in the history of the world. In 1991, they inherited a hyperpower that wins everywhere without fighting. But by 2021, they produced a declining power that fights everywhere without winning. It's 30 years of unmitigated domestic and international failure, from San Francisco to Syria, from financial crisis to coronavirus. With every inherited advantage, U.S. leaders nevertheless produced historical collapses in life expectancy and manufacturing capacity, in patriotic loyalty and involvement in community. They also delivered concomitant, I don't know what that, anyway, similar time, rises in drug overdose, out of wedlock births, and homeless encampments. And no, they have no historical, philosophical, or literary depth. The historical analogies begin and end with 1939. The philosophy is little more than constant accusations of racism. And the reading level of U.S. presidential speeches has measurably dropped like a rock to idiocratically elementary levels. I wouldn't put Trump in that category at all. I think Trump is one of the best writers and best speech makers ever. So he's only off by one here. The rest of them are basically mentally handicapped, but including Obama, right? Now I get the technique at the time, and I've mentioned it with I've complimented it here, but I only complimented in terms of historical trends, right? When I don't like seeing someone read off a teleprompter for hours. That, like, I always think Trump's best criticism of Obama was, "Hey, teleprompter guy." It was hilarious. The only thing the establishment has delivered is on their own bottom line. Think about Pelosi's stocks, BLM's mansions, Obama's book deals, and 10% for the big guy. The corruption is now flagrant and public. As others have observed, we're in the looting the treasury phase of Imperial collapse, as the national debt soars past $33 trillion with literally no limit in sight. Stupid or evil, he asks. And that's what leads to the conspiracy theories. Are U.S. leaders stupid or evil? Did they unintentionally ruin what was once the greatest country on earth, or was it intentional and done for their own game? The conspiracy theories are a way for mere proles to make sense of the senseless. They aren't all wrong, mind you. WMD was fake, the AAA mortgage-backed securities were fake, Russiagate was fake, and so on. Evil was involved in intentionally faking these stories. But ultimately, thinking of U.S. leadership as evil gives them too much credit. It's hard to remain global number one. The nature of entropy means there are countless ways for the world order to shatter and only a few ways to keep it intact. Maybe George Washington could find one of those ways, but we have Joe Biden. And that's why DC is losing the mandate of heaven, right? I think they lost the mandate of heaven probably a generation ago when they killed Kennedy, right? And we still have to pick up the pieces of that thing. We still have to reckon with what we did. And that's why I've been saying for a long time that nation states themselves, the corporate body, the brand name of America, has to lose World War III. I want American people to win World War III, right? How do we win World War III? Well, we destroy our government. It's that simple, right? It is literally that simple. We destroy the money that backs the government, and we're not going to have this trouble anymore. And again, it's the reason why I put everything into Bitcoin as far as intellectual capital goes for the coming change, because Bitcoiners are prepared for this, right? We look at Argentina and we say, does that election look credible? Right? Is Massa really like people really are into this guy because he's going to get rid of income tax, which they don't even pay because they're so poor? We'll see, right? We'll see. Now, I agree that it's not just cheating on election counting. They can mass hypnotize people, mass brainwash people, and they're very good at that. They're much better at that than they are at cheating in election machines. But we're forcing them down to the level of cheating in election machines, right? And we'll see what happens in Argentina. Now, my prediction is because it's two people, it's easy to cheat, right? Because the threshold of cheating at 2 is much less than 3 or 4. With 3 or 4, you can't. It's harder to hide the way it looks like things might have been manipulated in America. So the point is, we're going to see what goes on in Argentina. If the cheating is too questioned, I think it's the end of Trump. I mean, that's what I worry about, right? I continue to worry that they're not the only thing now that I think can stop Trump is excessive cheating, which is becoming less and less possible because of the other candidates, or a JFK situation, right? So the JFK situation for Trump is, I think, I used to think no way. They were fine using the character assassination method they developed for Nixon. That dog ain't working anymore. He's more and more popular, and I don't think he's going anywhere now. So we'll see. But it looks like things are happening quick, and the day delusions die, I don't think they get away with doing it to Trump without people knowing, right? All right, so let me see what we got here. Yeah, he's in second. We got the runoff. November 19th is the final vote. Yeah, Jevy, good morning, my man. Sorry I jumped in today. You know, we had to go quickly. If you want to continue supporting the current thing, but don't want to spend money to replace your Ukraine church, just pay the other part white. Racist homeschools. What's this? Everyone has to watch JFK denial and everything is a rich man's trick. I didn't see that. Yeah, Argentinian election is an American one. Yeah. Hitler made homeschooling illegal. He did. Yeah. I didn't really understand when all of that stuff was. Toltecs in ancient Mesoamerica called the mind parasite the mitot. Yeah, you know what I've realized too, that the collective unconscious, and that the inner psychology was treated not as a personal thing, but as a societal thing for a long time. That collective unconscious was the societal part of consciousness in the ancient world, which I think is a really good way to put it, which is why churches and everything were there to keep these malaises out, right? When all-time high. Prediction. We love predictions. CIA pops RFK. CIA finds evidence. And because he was taking Trump votes. Oh my God, Trump. I hope they go for this one. Well, that's not true. I don't want to see all these people. This could get really dangerous. But you've actually put a very credible theory into place. So there you go. Emmanuel asks, hi Nolan, what are a few ways to get involved in Bitcoin for a non-computer science person? Well, let me show you. Let me read my. So the book is coming along, team. We'll be ready before Thanksgiving for sure. But this is one way you can get along. Get involved. I think can't really see it. Let me just thing down a bit. Yeah. All right. So my guide book is almost there. And I've written it as like a book of spells. It's like, because I don't want anyone to confuse it with arguments or debates. They're not argument. It's not advice either, right? It's something totally different. But here, it's we're in a psychological war. So I think the most important thing we can do for Bitcoin is just remove the scales from people's eyes. And my book here is, like I said, it's not arguments. It's just diversions and ways to get people going and thinking about things differently and maybe awakening them. It's a way to protect yourself first and foremost amongst these people, but it's also a way to maybe awaken something inside of them. So it's very good stuff. So that, to me, Emmanuel, is not a computer science argument, right? It's not that, but we're still going to need the peers that operate in Bitcoin to help each other and help other people. So I still think, the reason I got into what I do in this business is I asked the same question to Andreas Antonopoulos in 2014, I guess. And his advice was, look, we need people to go out and talk and educate about Bitcoin. And so I said, well, I think you've got the market pretty much sewed up because you're so good at it. But I had been speaking with a lot of, because I worked in the Senate at this time, I sort of knew how to talk to bank heads and central bankers and people like that. I didn't know much about Wall Street yet, but I figured that sort of sophisticated audience might be a targeted thing for myself. And so that's what I did. I, got a job on Wall Street with the start of CoinDesk and really was the original Bitcoin evangelist to Wall Street, right? To just those people. I met a lot of, like, the BlackRock stuff I've known about for a long time because I was called into the BlackRock offices many times in 2017 and to explain what was going on. And I was not far from Fink's office, let's put it that way. Like, I was reporting directly to people that were reporting to him. So I knew the questions they were asking. I knew what they were thinking of. Not that it was this big conspiracy, but whenever I heard them say, oh, it's a scam or anything, I knew they were lying, right? I just knew it. I knew what they're up to. So it was that in a lot of cases. I was with the backed people when they started, and they own the New York Stock Exchange, so I would meet them there. And anyway, all of these people, Morgan Stanley, all of them, right? That was the job. Let's get that CoinDesk guy in here and talk about it. So now, that was a long time ago. I chose a huge but targeted audience, but I think all of our friends and family, that's what the book is about, right? It's this book is for Bitcoiners. It's written with respect to toxic maximalists. While it's a noble road, some people prefer limited interactions with fiat-centered, non-playable characters. This book aims for a toxic microdosing approach to enhance your freedom of speech and thought while increasing your chances of survival surrounded by NPC sludge people. Now, it's true the NPC would kill you and not care if that is what they are hypnotized into doing, so this handbook works as a survival manual of sorts. While the threat is real, the NPC can be redirected and reprogrammed with ease by the initiated. Bitcoin can serve as an organizing principle around which Bitcoiners can navigate their real lives with NPCs. So welcome, valiant peer, dear Bitcoiner, treasured compatriot, to a quest unlike any you've embarked upon. This isn't just a financial revolution, it's a crusade of consciousness. Your friends and family might seem like players in this grand game of life. It's time to face the truth. Many are NPCs, ensnared by the fiat system's illusion. But fear not, this handbook is your guide. What this book isn't is a list of arguments or any kind of advice. It's better to think of what's in here as spellcasting. It's a protocol for how to use Bitcoin as a subject to protect yourself from NPCs while you navigate the dying fiat world. And in some cases, the ideas spelled out here can even work to wake NPCs up. What follows is your collection of spells to protect yourself and awaken NPCs to the magic of Bitcoin. Prepare to reprogram reality. In the end, none of us want to eat the bugs, but we also don't want our friends from eating the bugs, right? Our friends and family are really just mentally handicapped, and we should treat them that way, right? I got a couple good notes here too. Oh yeah, this one's good. In the game of life, NPCs are those who wander the paths laid before them unquestioningly. They've accepted the world as it is, as it has been presented, a stage where the directors of the fiat system mistaking the set's purpose, wealth, status, and security for the plot itself. Understand, dear peer, these characters aren't our adversaries. They're your charges, fellow players, yet to realize they're part of the game, right? So there's some good stuff here, guys. You're gonna like it. Is it on Amazon? It will be. Yeah, it's gonna be a good book, guys. It's written. It actually is totally written. It's not even that long. It's only like 6 or 7,000 words. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sell it for Sats for very little, right? So if you pay with Sats, you'll get it for like a couple thousand Sats. But if it's dollars, it'll be like $100 on Amazon because look, you're making me go into a prison to take that's what I was thinking, right? So for Sats, directly for Sats, it's going to be what you're used to paying, right? It's not going to be expensive. But if I have to go into a place to pick up money, in my mind now, it's like literally dropping money in a prison. Like I'm not going to get arrested, but I don't want to walk into a prison and pick up money and walk out. So if it's going to be worth my while, like I'm not going to go for 5 trash tokens, right? But if it's 100 trash tokens, okay. If I sell like 5 books for 100 trash tokens each, you know, and then I have 500 trash tokens, US trash tokens, then I'll go and, you know, then it's worth going into a prison because I got all this KYC shit when you deal with Amazon and like, who are you? And then I got to put NPC in a title. They're probably going to get mad about that. You know, blah, blah, blah. So if I have to walk into a prison and just to get money, it's got to be worth my while. I can't do it for like, you know, 15 trash tokens or 20 trash tokens, or it's just not, I just don't care. I'll never do it. Like I won't go get the money. Right. Yeah, Sats will be the way. Like Sats, it'll be, you know, I'll charge probably maybe 20,000 Sats or something like that. It won't be a lot, but it'll be 100 US trash tokens, 100 for sure. Like, when will Amazon take BTC? Probably never. I don't think. I have a feeling our good friend, like, you know, some people think about Rome a lot, right? That whole thing. You know what I think about? How Jeff Bezos loses $100 million a year on the Washington Post. Like, what the fuck is up with that? Something's going on. Now, I hope it's just that they have a picture and, you know, maybe he's like penally challenged and he's embarrassed, right? That would be great. If it's just something like that, great, right? If it's something else, we got a problem. We got a major problem. And we got to figure it out. So, you know, Jeff Bezos, I still give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to just assume. But the Washington Post is not making him look good. and I don't believe it for a minute because look, we've been talking about it for a while. How the hell does someone who makes the best software company in the world, and that's what it is, right? Every time I use Amazon, it's the best. I'm never like, oh shit, where's that Amazon update I didn't get? And now my fucking app won't work like every other app, right? I don't think I've ever updated Amazon once. I haven't needed to. It works. It actually just works. That's enough these days. That's enough, right? So something's up. Something's up with this guy. I don't hear him coming to his rocket man friend Elon Musk defense. Elon paid $44 billion for his freedom of speech. And he had to do that because the Washington Post was punching him in the face. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know. But something's up. So Jeff Bezos, hopefully it's just a thing where it's like, hey, I had no choice. They were gonna whatever, right? I had to lose 100 million a year. But it wasn't like it's not it's not one of the delusions we have to get rid of, right? It's things like this. Like, oh yeah, sure. Jeff Bezos, the best entrepreneur of our time, maybe, right? He's at least in the conversation. The best entrepreneur of our time buys the shittiest asset in the world, the Washington Post, a discredited, like, just think about what he understands about the future, having built Amazon, right? And now he's like, oh, newspapers, maybe. I don't think so, right? I don't think so. It's like, you know how the future is going to be, so you buy a newspaper, which is the worst, and it's just filled with criminals like Phil Bump and all these other people, right? So it's not credible. So he's got some explaining to do. Hopefully we find out. So yeah, it looks like we've got, this is the documentary about central bankers plotted and accomplished. Yeah, I mean, the JFK thing, I think, is now exactly what it looks like, right? There was a part of the government, it looks like the FBI too, right? The FBI and the CIA were not answering to, like, J. Edgar Hoover. He was not under Kennedy's control. Kennedy admitted the CIA wasn't under his control. His nephew has said it a few times. That's what RFK is running on. And it looks like they just said, this president is in our way. He's in our way, right? So there's a reason why you want kings. Harder to do this to, right? So we've got some delusions that we're still not quite awake from. That I know he has his own rocket company. Yeah, I know he does. Protection money, Bezos to up. I don't know what it is, guys. I really don't. I mean, I think anyone's just speculating on this. There isn't. We're lacking information about what Bezos is actually up to. I'm just saying that I'm preoccupied by it. I think about it a lot, right? What's he doing? Because you want to see him join a team either way. You want to just know where he sits, right? Maybe he is just on his own and trying to survive this like all the rest of us. Maybe, right? So VT meetup next month. Yeah, I spoke with the Vermont guys about it. It should happen, Daniel. Let me talk to them one more time. But we got to do it. Yeah, I'll be in Vermont a lot of November as it is, which is a weird time to be in Vermont. But I like the calm down and the cool weather time a bit. You know, we do 5 seasons in my world, so this is as close to winter as we get, and we like to enjoy it. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I shall see you all soon. You're gonna love the book. It's gonna be really good. It should come out really soon because it's not gonna be like it's not a huge formatting job or anything like that. Give me some tips though. I might do a video. I might read it online. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure it out. It's not long. It's only like 6,000 words or something like that. So it's not a huge thing. It's a good protocol though. It's a good protocol. It'll help. It should help most people survive World War III. So that's the good news. All right, team. Peace.